Good afternoon, and welcome to another exciting episode of our Who's Next webinar series. In today's edition, we are going to visit the realms of compliance yet again. So get ready for an engaging conversation about the importance and benefits of being compliant with industry standards and other legislative requirements, and learn how compliance can actually be a strategic asset that propels your business forward. I am delighted to be your host today, but before we start, I have a few housekeeping notes for you. First of all, we are recording today's session and we'll be making it available to watch on demand after today's webinar. We will also take questions at the end, so please add your questions to the Q&A section of the Zoom window, and we will try to address these questions today. But even if we run out of time, we will make sure to answer all of your questions after the webinar in writing, and we will share the answers with you as well. So with that, let me introduce myself. I'm Peter Budai, and I've proudly been part of the Treasury family for 12 years now. And currently as a Chief Technology Officer here at Treasury, I'm leading the product and data engineering teams. But what is also more relevant here is that I'm also responsible for product and IT security departments at Treasury that are also major contributors to our compliance task force as well. Therefore, I'm very, very excited to have Bavo van den Heuvel with me today. Bavo is a seasoned compliance expert in IT consultancy and data privacy. He's a founder and currently a CTO of Cranium, which is a Belgian company focusing on privacy, security, and data management. Welcome, Bavo.
Thank you,
it's nice to have you here today. Please tell a few words about yourself. What led you to the security and privacy field at the first place?
Yeah, I'm a business engineer as background and currently 28 years in security and 20 years full-time in privacy as a famous data protection officer. And so it was already a long time ago in Belgium that certain governmental agencies had to comply with, let's say, the predecessor of the GDPR, as the older people know about Directive 95/46, which was the predecessor to the GDPR. And so already at that time, there were a lot of things the same as the GDPR, a lot of things changed. I helped organizations, in fact, to translate, let's say, the legal thing of it to the practical side of it or the IT side of it. And so from that experience, I discovered that it was not only a burden and a pain and expensive, but it also gave a lot of business opportunities. And those insights I want to share today, since sometimes, especially when you have to convince your management, it costs a lot of money, and why do we have to do it, and what if we don't do it? And today I want to give a more positive view to it and share with you my experience, my findings.
And we are absolutely looking forward to it. And what are your main focus of operations at Cranium? What kind of topics or services you typically help your customers with?
We mainly work, it all started with the GDPR, of course, the General Data Protection Regulation. But then, as you know, on a member state level, there are also other laws that have an implication, laws on national security laws, laws on employment law, so things that are, let's say, not so well defined by the GDPR or camera laws. And then also next to that, sectoral laws, now also the challenges with NIS2, we are also working on that, the AI Act, and all upcoming, let's say, obligations or bright ideas of Europe without being too cynic. And that's what we help our clients with. So both at the legal side, giving them the right advice to do the things right, but also translating it into applications, using secure cloud storage, confidential computing, secure exchange, all the newest technologies, we also advise them on that. So we go much further, or let's say the step further than typical law firms who stick only to the legal side of it, but are not that good, or most of them are not that good in applying it in technology. And that's where we come up and are quite successfully. We are today with 80 people and did over 1,000 projects in this. So,
voilà. Yeah, that's interesting, and congratulations for your journey so far. So as you mentioned just now, that compliance is a broad topic, and depending on the industry and geographic location and target customer segments and the actual operations that the company is doing, it might be like a plethora of regulations that apply to a company. And yet, like, unfortunately, it's still kind of a common sentiment among the industries that any kind of compliance is basically just as unnecessary hassle that, okay, a company needs to tackle in one way and another, but it's not, it's just a hassle. But yeah, we are here today to break this down a myth and talk about the benefits and how it can actually elevate company's brand or drive revenue, or even boost productivity. So you mentioned GDPR and NIS2 in your introduction as well, and we are going to touch both of these topics as well, and also some generic experiences of yours, because I'm pretty sure that you have like a very close experience through your customers and good and maybe bad examples of this on the market in the industry. So let's start with GDPR, because like maybe the last time when compliance were like at the very center of every company and in the mainstream discussion was when GDPR went into effect in 2018. What did you experience, or how GDPR helped companies, or on other areas than just personal data privacy itself?
Yeah, what we saw is that a lot of companies, the better ones, were already thinking about it in 2012, the draft text of the GDPR. But of course, like with the AI Act, it took years until it was finalized and a lot of things changed. And the smarter ones, in April 2016, the final text was published. Then they started working, and then the not so proactive ones, they started in May or beginning of May 2018. And what we see there is that some people, let's say, did a huge effort in 2018 and then it stopped. Yeah, we are 6 years later, which means that you are maybe today 10% compliant still, because businesses, we are in a highly dynamic environment. Businesses change a lot. You do new things. There are mergers, acquisitions, all types of things have an influence in the way you are doing business. So an important thing is here, once you do the effort, it's like with ISO 27002, once you do the effort to be compliant, please try to sustain it, try to maintain it, and only look, of course, at the deltas. And what we discovered is that companies who, some certain companies, multinationals, or especially Japanese, German companies, have, let's say, are more interested in being very compliant. So what we discovered there, that companies, although their core business is not processing personal data, that when they also try to be compliant, that we discovered certain inefficiencies, certain business processes that were not complete. As we all know, or I will briefly explain, the GDPR, as one of its obligations is to have a register of processing activities, which is in fact an overview of all the, let's say, business processes called processing activities, where a company is processing personal data. It can be typically the hiring process, from the application rounds until the hiring of a person, but of course many other things. And when filling out Europa, companies start seeing, especially when it is as a kind of a maturity, that there are gaps. I didn't know we were still doing this. Why are we still doing this? It's still stored on this local server. Why are we keeping this already for 30 years? Yeah, nobody dares to delete it. Why do we have the data? I don't know, but Mark, who retired, was working on the data. Why do we ask so many personal data to a person? Yeah, we've been doing this for years, so no clue. Who receives this data? Can also come out of it, even through a technical analysis. But we send it to that party. Why does he need that information? Are we working with US cloud providers? Where is the data going to? What do the contracts tell us? How is the data secured? Do we have a kind of a classification level? Not all data is as sensitive as other data, but some companies, they, let's say, protect everything to the lowest level, and others protect everything to the highest level. But when working about, you know that too, Peter, working around security and classification, the idea is to work with security in an efficient way, giving the basic protection to basic information, but the sensitive data gets more security, more protection, like using Treasury or other secure storage. So that are things that come out of it, which, when treated well, give company certain advantages, things they didn't know, insights they get. And especially when I'm working here, since I also work as a consultant, when trying to fill out that register, yeah, it's not a matter of looking to a manual or to the CMDB database. No, it's doing interviews with people. Why is this? Why is that? Like an auditor talking about all the elements. And sometimes they don't know, or people have different meanings about it. And just by doing that, it even goes that's the next level, of course, to business process re-engineering. But we are doing it wrong. That's not a good way to do it. And so that's, in short, some things I share about my experience there. Of course, it goes much further too. Where do we get those data from? Yeah, you discover on the network a file server with lots of whatever, Excel, CSV, a database. Yeah, where does it come from? We don't know, so we don't dare to delete it. What we also see is there are processes missing. Yeah, they are not documented. Nobody knows how it works. Or sometimes a thing that people forget too, with the GDPR, if it's exclusively on paper and not meant to be in a structured system, it's outside of the GDPR. But in certain cases, it starts, for instance, with a contract, but certain process steps in between can also be on paper. Yeah? Are they documented? Where do we keep a copy of those documents? Can we find it back? Is it well indexed? So that are things we discover. And also the risk, people forget, if you have too much data on one hand, or if you have the data too long, that in itself is a risk, because let's say that you have a data breach, or the data is stolen, or you are being hacked. Yeah, you lose data that you were no longer allowed to have. So if there's an investigation by a supervisory authority, you have a double problem. Not only did you lose the data, but you also have to admit that you still had the data. So that's from my experience. So that when starting with a focus on the business processes related to personal data, all of a sudden it not even gives insights in efficiencies, both at security and at process level, but it also, as this personal data many times also touches other types of data, it gives a company better insights in the way they work.
Yeah, and then it is safe to say that there are cases when you get like immediate financial benefits, like basically re-engineering your process. It turns out that we did it with a lot of manual work earlier, and if we have like a more systematic approach of how handling data, we can do it even faster. So it was like an instant win, and not necessary just like reducing the risk, which is obviously a very important factor of all these data privacy questions and all, like handling data, is that handling only that amount of data and that data that you specifically need a business always reduces the risk. But it's often not that easily quantifiable. But like an instant change in the business process that's measurable work hours, it's an instantly visible win here. Yeah. So you also we have promised the audience that we also talk about NIS2, which is like now becoming a hot topic, or next hot topic in at least in the European Union and European regulations. It's not that broad. Does not apply to every company, but it's broad enough to at some point reach most of the companies. What difference does NIS2 bring to the existing regulation space in the EU? And again, the question is that what can affected companies like profit from being NIS2 compliant internally?
Yeah, I think first, let's say an educational angle to it is that the NIS2, it's based on a directive, which means that it is a European directive, and each country, each member state has to translate it into their own national legislation, which is, let's say from consultancy perspective, a good thing, because it will be different in each country, which is a problem for multinationals. But the interesting thing is, for those of you who are aware about the standard confidentiality, integrity, availability that you know from IT security and ISO 27000, is that NIS2 puts it more on the criticality angle. looking for, let's say, the business continuity of for a country as a whole. So thinking about utility companies, about hospitals, but also, and that's I think for a lot of people in the audience also important, also people who are suppliers in the chain, like with digital services. And I think treasury is also in scope of that. If businesses depend on the availability of treasury, you are an essential part in it. And I think this, of course, some people will say it's overregulation again, but it will at least give you the idea on thinking about what is critical for my business to continue. Because it's like with an insurance and security in general, we never had a problem. And you only discover when you have a problem that you didn't prepare, that it's very difficult to recover. So that's an interesting one. I would say companies should think about, in fact, do a desktop exercise. And what do we need to start our business when we are on an island, when everything went down, including your cloud services? Because there you count on, they are in the cloud, they don't have the same problem, but let's say they have the same problem. And you have certain obligations towards your clients, towards the citizens, towards the government. How will you cope with that? Something small maybe, but something that's easily forgotten. People think that when using Microsoft Teams, Google, Amazon, or even Treasury, that it includes offline backups, which means that if let's say all your data is on your endpoints is encrypted to ransomware, it will be synced to other systems in the cloud. Do we still then can recover from that? For instance, at our company, we use both Microsoft Teams for the administrative part and Treasury for the client projects. We have offline backups, and offline backup makes it possible to start all over again. You go to the shop, buy some computers, and then you start in a new office. And also think about that regarding your SaaS solutions, whether you are using ERP systems in the cloud or others, how dependent are you on that? And also think about, let's say, a backup scenario. Maybe it's important that you can call to your IT guy or woman, that you can call your bank, that you can call your contacts. Do you have a contact list? That's the business continuity planning, disaster recovery planning, and also see to it that you have the lists. And it sounds very easy, but maybe everything is synced through iCloud, to Teams, and so on. But do you have a backup of that? You can, for instance, store a backup on Treasury or another cloud provider than your main cloud provider, just to be sure that if that system goes down, that you still have access to all the contacts that you need. Also, next to that, and that's more like in data centers, but still many companies depend on certain local service, is how is your electricity? Do you have a power generator? Do you have a double connection? What SLAs do you have? Do you have an assurance that the system will come up again? Do you have hot standby? Do you have a disaster recovery data center? So that are things that through the NIS2 companies, and if we think at the COVID times, there was also some panic with certain companies, that now we at least start thinking, and NIS2 doesn't have to do anything with COVID because there was also a NIS1 before that. But we will become more agile as a country and the supplier of that country through certain attacks. Of course, if everything is attacked and everything goes down, you will not be able to do everything you had to do. But it's important, I would say, start to think about offline backups and also start to do the simple exercise with your top management. How can we restart our business tomorrow? The only thing we have is, let's say, a hotel room and 10 computers. What can we do? Mm-hmm. What is the priority? Can we inform all our clients to say that we are down? Are we able to do that? Do we have all those emails not on our Exchange server because that's down too, but do we have it somewhere else?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very important aspect, and this is kind of clear from the from the intention of the lawmakers, that this is NIS2 is absolutely about like the resilience, the infrastructure resilience, and of within the EU, and this is the main let's say message of that upcoming legislation. So there is, and now like we cover the like these very specific regulations, but are there some, I don't know, like generic or other fields. So they are mostly it was like we touched data privacy, we touched like availability or resilience, but there are like other kind of compliances like health and safety that are not necessarily the first one that comes to your mind. What other benefits could like these areas bring to your
Yeah, I think
company or work?
I'm also a health and safety officer, and all types of things. But the thing what you have to do there, because let's imagine that you are the person who's responsible for whatever regulation. Yeah, if you don't do it the right way, your management will say, yeah, and it will cost us 50,000 euro, 100,000 euro to become compliant, and we have to spend time on you. So, what is an important thing to do is to understand within your organization what are the other plans. And I would say obvious things is like IT. The IT department says, okay, now we will work on an offline backup. We will work on higher availability because our clients ask for it. Yeah, maybe these action points or these controls, if you translate it to ISO 27000, can have a positive effect on the obligations you have from your legal obligations. Or even something obvious like I already helped 4 clients with that. We will move to a new building. So a very old building and now to a new building. You would say, yeah, okay, what's the opportunity there? Yeah, there's an opportunity. Because especially with the government, but also utility companies, in many cases with old buildings, yeah, the citizens or the clients had to walk through the offices then to get to the back side of the building to have a meeting room where they can have a talk, which is a security problem, of course. So if you think about a new building and you are involved in time, yeah, you can think about maybe we need to put our meeting rooms in the beginning of the building, or you can also think about where should we put our data center, or you can think about do we need late evening openings, for instance. So always be it's quite opportunistic. Look at other plans and see how they can help your challenges, which then for the management is good because it's already on that budget, so it's not an extra cost for you. Also on, let's take the HR angle. They have a new software. Okay, cool. Maybe the software integrates nicely with your Active Directory or another user management. Yeah, then gives a lot of opportunities regarding the onboarding of people, offboarding of people, internal mobility. Also, the enforcement of policies. HR typically related to things like bring your own device, car, off-site working, and so on. Yeah, that can also bring in certain wins for your challenges. Even something like health and safety, as you mentioned, health and safety officer, they have also, depending on the member state legislation, certain obligations. Yeah, something like ergonomics, or maybe you have a new work environment where you need typically those phone booths to have private conversations. That's good for the privacy. That's good not to bother others. That's also good for confidentiality for all types of communications you will have. So that's our let's say things that are easily forgotten. Or on another level, a challenge, and it's both in private sector as in public sector, is program management. Program management, so let's say the next level on top of the project management is, what technologies we will be using. Sometimes it's useful to have standardization, but on the other hand, it's also a weak point because we'll be dependent on certain technologies. But it also asks for a central vision on security and architecture. I once was talking with a client, and there, the marketing department, they had their own budget. And what happened? Yeah, they, for a few €100 per month, they used several cloud tools, but that was completely out of the view of the IT and the IT security department. So they had, in fact, a kind of almost a data breach. All the CRM data up was just put in the cloud with a few $100 of monthly subscription fees. Yeah. And so more in general, it's important in whatever legal challenges you have to be involved, and you can be involved or to ask the management to get insights in certain decisions for the next year, to get insights in plans, plans that are made here, plans that are made, budget plans that are made, or even have a good relationship with the bookkeeping department or the purchasing department, because they will ask for prices, they will get offers, and they will order certain things. So that's an important angle. And for instance, for the health and safety, there's an obligation even if we have to buy new chairs, we need to check that they are in line with certain EU standards again. So if you take this approach by looking at, let's say, all the opportunities with all the different departments related to your challenges, you will need much less budget to do so. The management will be happy, and then you will have a delta budget that you still need, of course, for the very specific things that don't fit in those other programs.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And you mentioned like ergonomics. This is
Yeah.
like it hits me close. I mean, like this chairs question is always comes up, and then this can be like a good, even like from an HR branding perspective, like ergonomics directly relates to employee satisfaction at some point,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, especially if a lot of the people are in the office, obviously. So it's always these relations, and it's really, I think, yeah, that a very important thing you mentioned is that, yeah, if it's intermixed and they work together with all the other departments, then the cost and the step for the compliance is not that big. So it suddenly seems just a small gap that you need to make.
And also really try to, so when you have those opportunistic matches, document it. So by investing in a next generation firewall, it gives me this and this and this advantage. Yeah? Sometimes it goes even the other way around too, from my experience in the GDPR, is let's say the IT manager gets difficulties in having a budget for his next generation firewall. But on my budget for privacy, it's interesting too to have a better firewall who, for instance, can easily detect malware which is active and tries to get out of the company. So if I can then get an advice as DPO, that for me it's also useful. The management will take part of the privacy budget, and there's a next generation firewall. The IT guy will be happy, and he will help you next time if he wants to buy something and says, that's maybe interesting for you too.
I have like a very specific, I have a question. Like, it's always, as for companies in early stage or not that mature in terms of compliance, like that, when it is good to like start thinking about compliance, like let's say, for example, like a startup.
When we have to start thinking about it, yeah, I would say the earlier the better. It's, of course, I'm a consultancy company, but you can, of course, start dreaming about, let's say, a startup who wants to make a nice app or something, but don't wait too long with it, because you will maybe make certain decisions that can show later on that maybe certain things are not allowed in Europe or in your country. Yeah, so it's not a bad idea thinking about software development lifecycle to at certain points already have a check with the DPO or other people who are involved with certain other legislation to see if this is possible within our ideas, because otherwise you get a lot of money who's wasted, a lot of frustration with startups, and their investors also will get angry. So that's sometimes we are also hired by investors to evaluate, let's say, the legal compliance of an investment they want to do, to see if it is possible at all. I had once a startup, I had to tell them, yeah, sorry, bright idea, but it's not possible in Europe. And they were already developing it. That costs a lot of money, wasted money. And then you have a solution that you can only use, let's say, in the USA or somewhere else.
Yeah, and then it's also, like you mentioned, valuation, that this is often overlooked in the early stage of the company, like looking for growth, looking for success. But at some point, you will face the valuation question, and when it comes to close to an exit or a valuation, like compliance is like has a big weight on the actual valuation of the company. So
and also also in mergers and acquisitions, when they discover that there's a compliance gap, it costs money. We can even calculate it. If you buy a company who's, let's say, only 50% GDPR compliant, what does it cost to become, let's say, 30 or 40% more compliant, because you don't have to be 100% compliant.
I really hope that our audience like get some nice ideas, and like the overall idea is that why we shouldn't think compliance as a hassle, but more like an opportunity or a function that can actually help stepping up the rest of the company's game or the other departments' processes. So thank you for all these insights, and I'm pretty sure that you could continue for at least, I don't know, an hour maybe.
2 days,
But
2 days,
yeah,
no
but we
problem.
are trying to be conscious of the time.
Mhm.
And before we before we jump to the questions, I think this is the best time to summarize the key takeaways that we talked about. So yeah, first of all, I think what we actually is learned for the last one that we learned is that investing in compliance in the early days of the company will be cheaper in the long run, and it has a great effect on valuation as well, for example, which is often an overlooked aspect. Also, earlier we mentioned that like moving together or having good relationship with other related company functions could significantly lower the cost of compliance itself, and the both parties can benefit from that. So this is should be the way to approach these compliance questions. Like the more general one, like in the investing in compliance, it could bring not just like reducing long-term risks, but it can actually bring instant benefits in other areas of the company. So you mentioned that filling out a report would actually uncover some IT security weaknesses, and you can instantly do IT security improvements. Or if you after the assessment, you do some re-engineering of your business processes, it can actually have like direct financial gains immediately. And I think like the one thing that is also important, that GDPR was introduced like 6 years ago, and 6 years a lot. And if you're not maintaining or your compliance framework, it is high time to revisit it, especially in the light of NIS2 is coming and maybe applicable to your company as well. So yeah, I think this is really interesting. And now we can move to the questions. The first question comes already. Could you please write down the name of this new regulation? It is actually on the previous slide, so it's NIS2, what we were talking about on the very last line there. Maybe while we are waiting for another question, there is one key takeaway that was not on the slide, but I think it was very important, and you emphasize it as well, is that especially on the lights of NIS2, like when focusing on disaster recovery, it's often overlooked that we shouldn't rely on one provider only, because if you put all your disaster recovery elements and your main business line to the same provider, you will facing challenges when eventually some disaster happens. So I think it was also an important area. Yeah. Apparently,
there are not so many questions, but that means that everything was clear, which is also
good. I hope so. We have a question now. It's
voilà.
okay. It needed some time to type those. Okay, it's one Trezoid related. Is it compliant to have a Trezoid link in your email signature where customers can upload documents, not download?
Yes, it is okay, because it's you as a company that says, in fact, voila, if you want to share information with me in a secure way, this for me is a secure way to share information with me. So it is on you to define the security. It is on the other party to decide if you are allowed to receive the information. It's not that you ask me, but if the other party sends it to you, at least for the security, for you, that's a secure channel. And then the fact if you are allowed to receive the information is on the other party to decide. That's not only for the GDPR, but in general for business too. So I think it's a good way, Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous attendee, because that way you at least know it's secure. We see a lot of people also with our clients sending out medical information, medical files through email. because people still think that email is a kind of a direct one-to-one connection, which is in most cases not the case. So I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and also if I can add to this, like when we created these links, so this file request link on the question, like we made explicitly sure that like even if customer is opening the link, as long as it's not interacting and not went through all the like surrounding legal frameworks, we are not kind of a logging any personal information of that. So even as a like you being a data controller by putting that links there, like you are covered because of the way we created that. So the other question: do you have any advices regarding HR GDPR, where to get info on the to be compliant with regulation?
Yeah. The interesting thing is, and I think that Laura is aiming at that, the GDPR in Article 88 mentions that a lot of the things surrounding HR are defined on member state level. So an interesting one is there, I think Delay Piper, the big law firm, has a site that at least gives basic information in the different topics for HR, for instance, for each member state. What we do when we work for multinationals is also contacting social services companies that especially know everything related to that. But it's very different. It has an impact on retention periods, the amount of data you can ask for or are obliged to ask for from the government. Also everything related to inclusion and diversity, so Article 9 data of the GDPR that should be in a member state law. Also regarding dismissal procedures and all those things, which also means, Laura, that if you look at the processing activities, yeah, they are different per country. The hiring of people in Belgium and in the Netherlands is different. Firing of people is different. Sometimes there's even a distinguishing between blue-collar worker, white-collar worker. So you should really look at websites who give support related to world legislation, or of course contact a consultancy company who's aware of it. But that's a tough one. If you are multinational, active in all European member state countries, that really takes a lot of your time. But luckily, normally you have local people that are aware of the legislation.
All right. So let's select one last question. I think let's talk about the offboarding because it's a more like a direct question, and the questions about Treasury we can answer later. And most probably the audience is more interested in your idea. So it's a very specific question, like for when offboarding an employee, when they leave the org, could we have access to their mailbox? And if yes, how long?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there too, the supervisory authorities of the member states also came up in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in France, came up with certain advice, which is linked then to their local laws. But in general, what I propose is that to start with, you should have an email policy, and that policy should be known to that employee before the person starts there. What my best practice is from experience is that although you can say to people, and there's also a court case on that, you can say to people, you cannot use the company email for private communication. The judge has said, you cannot avoid it. It's normal. People do it, so you cannot avoid it. What we do ourselves and also with our clients is when somebody is dismissed, and then hopefully in a good standing, you sit together with that person. You ask that person at his computer, are there certain mails you still need to have? That person can offload the mails because it's private communication or whatever related to whatever. And then after that, it's also possible to say, okay, can we keep, if you ask this, and especially if it's an email policy, can we keep this mailbox, for instance, for 3 months for the sole purpose of whatever, following up on certain projects? It's always better to have a complete documentation, taking out everything, all decisions and so out of the mailbox. That's a possibility. What is not allowed, however, is you should then put an out of office on the mailbox, saying, Bavo left the company, you now have to contact Mark. That's what you have to do, but you cannot keep the mailbox open because people that send the mail to Bavo think it is directly to Bavo and are maybe not aware that Bavo is no longer working for the company. So that's not allowed. Reading all the mails that still comes in on Bavo, that's not allowed. You just have to send an out of office and drop those mails, although I know it's very challenging to know what comes in. This is something I can say in general terms, because you have to look at both the European court cases and also the national court cases, and also advice of the supervisory authority specifically related to this, because, yeah, as you can imagine, sometimes it's problematic.
Yeah, thank you, Bavo, for your answers. I'm afraid we must stop here, but as I mentioned earlier, we won't leave any questions unanswered. We will share you all the answers along with the recording of the whole session. So all is left is to wrap up today's session. First of all, I'd like to thank you again, Bavo, for being here with us today. It was a really intriguing discussion, and I'm pretty sure that our audience learned a lot. I did, for sure. And if you want to learn more, or you can already sign up to our upcoming webinar about in this time about like final industries and how data security strategies affects the final industry. It's going to be on the 10th of July at the same time. Should you be interested in rewatching either this webinar or any of our previous webinars, we made them available to be watched on demand on our website as well. So I can advise you to visit that page. For further information, what we are doing, you can always refer to our website. So both Trezoid's website and Cranium's website, which you can see on the screen, and reach out to us on any of our communication channels. That's for all today. Thank you for joining us, and I wish you all a nice afternoon. Goodbye.
Thank you.